In 1995, a 10-year-old boy vanished during a school field trip in Central Park, New York City. He was last seen near a mascot dressed as a bear, an entertainer no one could identify. In the next 48 hours, there was no sign of him, no witnesses, no leads. Just the chilling silence of a crowded park that suddenly swallowed a child. But then, near a conservation fence, the police find something discarded amongst the leaves. A grim discovery that transforms the mystery into something even more disturbing. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're listening to this case from. Autumn had painted Central Park in hues of gold and red, turning New York City into an impressionistic canvas. Rebecca Morgan adjusted the scarf around her neck as she watched the students from Westwood Elementary School scatter across the picnic area. As the assistant principal, she had organized this annual field trip to celebrate the beginning of fall, a tradition she'd maintained for 5 years. The October sky in 1995 was exceptionally clear, and the crisp air carried the scent of dried leaves and hot pretzels. "Tommy, don't wander off too far," Rebecca called out, noticing a blonde-haired 10-year-old boy running toward a group of children, gathered around a park entertainer dressed in a brown bear costume. Thomas Wheeler Jr., or TJ as everyone called him, turned briefly and waved, his blue school sweatshirt fluttering with the movement. His bright blue eyes sparkled with excitement, a contrast to his usually introspective personality. TJ was a reserved boy, the kind of child who preferred drawing in his notebook to participating in boisterous games. But today, something about the park had transformed him into a carefree child. Rebecca smiled as she watched TJ drag his best friend, Ethan Davis, toward the bear entertainer. The two boys had been inseparable since kindergarten, despite their contrasting personalities. While TJ was quiet and thoughtful, Ethan was energetic and talkative. "Ms. Morgan, can I take a picture of them?" asked Melissa Grant, one of the chaperoning teachers, raising her Kodak camera. "Sure," Rebecca replied, watching the children pose next to the bear mascot. The entertainer hugged TJ and Ethan, while colorful balloons floated in the background, creating a picture-perfect scene of childhood joy. The camera's flash captured TJ's smile, a rare and genuine smile that Rebecca hadn't seen in weeks. Since his parents' turbulent divorce last spring, TJ had become increasingly withdrawn. Rebecca knew the situation well, having had several meetings with TJ's mother, Catherine Wheeler, a kind but visibly overwhelmed woman adjusting to the reality of being a single parent. "The kids love that bear," Melissa commented, checking to make sure the film had advanced correctly in the camera. "He just showed up about 20 minutes ago. Must be part of the park's programming for school field trips." Rebecca frowned. "Strange. I don't remember seeing that mascot in previous years, and it's not on the schedule I received." She made a mental note to check on it later, but was soon distracted by a group of students who needed help opening their lunchboxes. As the group settled down for lunch, Rebecca did a quick head count. 32 students, 4 teachers, including herself, all present. The children's laughter echoed through the park, mingling with the rustling of dry leaves. It was one of those perfect moments that made Rebecca love her job. 20 minutes later, as the teachers gathered the students to continue the walk through the park, Melissa approached Rebecca, her face pale. "Rebecca, have you seen TJ? Ethan said he went to get another picture with the bear mascot, but I can't find him." A chill ran down Rebecca's spine. "When was this?" "I'm not sure. Maybe 10 minutes ago." Rebecca immediately organized the teachers for a search. Each was assigned an area to check, while she called park security from a nearby payphone. Her professional voice masked the growing panic she began to feel. 10-year-old boy, blonde hair, blue Westwood Elementary sweatshirt, light jeans, and red sneakers. Last seen near the central picnic area, possibly with an entertainer dressed as a brown bear. The initial search revealed nothing. The bear mascot had also disappeared. Park security arrived in minutes and the police were soon called. What started as an organized search quickly turned into a full-blown police operation. The other children were gathered and taken back to the school, while Rebecca remained in the park, working with the authorities. Detective Mark Sullivan, a man in his late 40s with tired eyes and an attentive posture, arrived 2 hours later. As helicopters hovered over the park and officers with tracking dogs searched every corner, Sullivan interviewed Rebecca at the makeshift command center. "What about the parents?" Sullivan asked, flipping through his notes on a yellow legal pad. "Have you contacted them yet?" Rebecca nodded, her voice trembling slightly. "The mother, Catherine Wheeler, is on her way. She has full custody. The father—" She hesitated. "Thomas Wheeler Sr. has bi-weekly supervised visits, but according to Catherine, he's cancelled the last 3. Sullivan raised an eyebrow. "Any specific reason?" "I don't know the details, but the divorce was messy. There were some accusations of unstable behavior on Mr. Wheeler's part." "Define unstable." Rebecca chose her words carefully. "He was extremely protective of TJ. He questioned Catherine's educational decisions, insisted the boy was being negatively influenced at school. He would show up unannounced to classes, demanding to see TJ's schoolwork. We had to implement special procedures to deal with him." Sullivan made a few more notes. "I'll need all his contact details." The expression on the detective's face made Rebecca's stomach clench. He didn't say it, but she knew what he was thinking. In cases of missing children, non-custodial parents were always the first suspects. When Catherine Wheeler arrived, Rebecca barely recognized her. The usually composed woman was pale, with red eyes and trembling hands. Sullivan led her to a private area for the interview, leaving Rebecca with her own tormented thoughts. The next few hours passed in a blur of police activity. Rebecca provided all the information she could, including the detailed description of the photo Melissa had taken with the bear mascot. Melissa promised to develop the film as quickly as possible to provide the image to the police. "It's a 24 exposure roll," Melissa explained, holding the camera. "I've used about half of it already. I can go to a 1-hour photo lab right now." Sullivan nodded. "Do it. We need that photo ASAP." As Melissa hurried off, Catherine approached Rebecca, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and fierce determination. "He's not lost," Catherine said, her voice low and intense. "I know my son. He wouldn't wander off on his own. Someone took him." Rebecca wanted to offer words of comfort, but she knew that empty platitudes wouldn't help. Instead, she placed a hand on Catherine's shoulder. "We're doing everything we can to find him." Catherine nodded, then asked the question Rebecca had been dreading. "Have you talked to Thomas yet?" "Detective Sullivan is trying to locate him now." A flash of something, anger perhaps, or a terrible suspicion, crossed Catherine's face. "He's been acting strange these past few weeks. More distant, cancelled the visits with TJ. Why? Said he was swamped at work, but now—" Catherine left the sentence unfinished, the unspoken hanging between them like a dark cloud. As night fell over Central Park, the search continued under powerful spotlights. Rebecca, unable to go home while TJ was still missing, remained at the command center, offering coffee to the exhausted officers and answering endless questions. It was close to midnight when Sullivan returned, his face even grimmer. "We've tried contacting Thomas Wheeler Sr. His phone is off. We sent units to his apartment. It's empty. Neighbors say they haven't seen him in a few days. And there's more. Catherine informed us that he left a gift for TJ on her doorstep about a week ago. A note said that things would change soon." Rebecca felt as if the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. "You think he—" Sullivan didn't answer directly. "We're following every lead possible. By morning we'll have more resources, more eyes on the streets. Now, Miss Morgan, you should go home. We need you rested for tomorrow." Rebecca reluctantly agreed. As she walked to her car, guilt weighed on her shoulders like a concrete blanket. She was responsible for TJ. She should have protected him. The tears she had held back all day finally began to fall. That night, the entire city seemed to hold its breath. Melissa had managed to develop the film, and copies of the photo of TJ with the bear mascot began to be printed for distribution. The image would be distributed to every precinct in the city and TV stations in the morning. Rebecca barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw TJ's smiling face, trusting and happy next to the bear mascot. Now that innocent image had taken on a sinister meaning, possibly the last record of TJ before his disappearance. The next morning at 5:30 a.m., her phone rang. It was Sullivan. "We found something," he said without preamble. "I need you to come to the park as soon as possible." The tone in his voice made Rebecca's heart freeze. "Is it TJ? Have you found him?" A painful pause. "Not yet, but we found an important lead. We're in the northern section near the conservation fence." Rebecca dressed hurriedly and drove through the nearly deserted streets of Manhattan. The sun had barely begun to peek over the horizon, painting the sky a pale pink that contrasted cruelly with the gravity of the situation. At the park, she found Sullivan talking to a forensics team. As she approached, she saw what had been found. Discarded among the bushes, partially hidden by dry leaves, was a torn and dirty brown bear costume. Nearby, a small red sneaker. "It's his," Rebecca whispered, immediately recognizing the sneaker. "It's TJ's sneaker," Sullivan nodded gravely. "A park worker found it while doing his morning rounds. We're processing everything as evidence." Rebecca watched as the forensic technicians meticulously photographed the scene, collecting fibers and possible fingerprints. The sight of the abandoned costume and the solitary sneaker seemed to make TJ's disappearance even more real and terrifying. "Does Catherine know yet?" she asked. "Not yet. I'm waiting for the forensics team to finish before informing her. I want to have as much information as possible." Rebecca nodded, understanding the logic but feeling a deep ache for Catherine. The next few hours would be devastating for TJ's mother. As she watched the meticulous work of the forensics team, Rebecca couldn't help but think that, somewhere, in the city, a 10-year-old boy was scared and far from home. The mental image was almost unbearable. The sun continued its ascent into the sky, bringing a new day to New York City, a day in which Thomas Wheeler Jr. remained missing, leaving behind only a small red sneaker as a silent testament that something terrible had happened in that once peaceful park. As the forensics team finished processing the scene, a crowd of reporters was already gathering at the entrances to Central Park. TJ's disappearance had become the top local news story, and the discovery of the abandoned bear costume only intensified media interest. Sullivan kept the reporters at bay, releasing only carefully selected information. "We are investigating all leads," he repeated in brief statements to the press. "The absolute priority is the safety of the boy." Back at the makeshift command center, Rebecca found Catherine Wheeler sitting alone, her hands clasped around a cup of cold coffee. Her deep eyeshadows and pale face told the story of a sleepless night. "Catherine," Rebecca began softly, sitting next to her. "They found something, didn't they?" Catherine's voice was surprisingly steady. "I can see it in everyone's eyes." Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. "An abandoned bear costume, and a red sneaker." Catherine closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the blow. When she opened them again, there was a fierce determination in them. "It's Thomas, I'm sure of it. He did this. The police are doing everything to locate him. It's not enough." Catherine stood up abruptly. "I need to see his apartment. Maybe there's something there, some clue the police don't know, something personal that only I would recognize." Sullivan, who had approached quietly, nodded. "Actually, we were about to suggest that. Detective Chen can accompany you there." Lisa Chen, a detective of Asian descent with keen eyes and a confident posture, introduced herself. "I'm ready when—" "You are, Ms. Wheeler." Catherine turned to Rebecca. "Would you come with me, please?" Rebecca looked at Sullivan, who gave a slight nod of approval. "Sure," she replied, grabbing her coat. Thomas Wheeler Sr.'s apartment was in a middle-class building, on the Upper West Side. The doorman recognized Catherine immediately. "Mrs. Wheeler, it's been a while since we've seen you around." "Hello, Eddie. I need to get into Thomas's apartment. It's an emergency." Eddie seemed hesitant. "Well, he hasn't been around for a few days. Actually, there's a lady who's been coming. By quite a bit. Thought she was his new girlfriend." Catherine and Chen exchanged meaningful glances. "What lady?" Chen asked. Eddie scratched his head. "30s-ish, brown hair, always wearing sunglasses even inside the building. Strange, if you ask me. Never says much." "Has she been here recently?" "Yeah, came in yesterday afternoon. Stayed. For a couple hours, left carrying some bags." Chen flashed her badge. "We need to get into the apartment now." Eddie, now clearly worried, nodded quickly. Sure. I'll get the master key." Thomas Wheeler's apartment was surprisingly organized for a place that seemed to have been abandoned in a hurry. The kitchen was clean, the living room tidy. But there were subtle signs of a hasty departure. The unopened mail piled on the entryway. Table, the wilting plant on the windowsill. Catherine walked slowly through the space, absorbing the details. He was always obsessively organized. Even when we separated, he catalogued every item in the house before we divided the assets. Chen began a systematic search, while Rebecca stayed close to Catherine, who now entered Thomas's home office. The Aosima desk was mostly bare except for a picture frame turned face down. Catherine picked it up. It was a photo of TJ fishing, smiling broadly at the camera. "That was last summer," Catherine murmured. "Before everything fell apart," Chen's voice came from the master bedroom. "I found something." The three women gathered around the perfectly made bed. Chen pointed to the open closet, where one section was visibly empty. Hangers swaying as if clothes had been removed recently and in a hurry. "And this," Chen continued, displaying the bedside table drawer. Inside was a passport, documents, and a folded map with red markings. Catherine picked up the map with trembling hands. "Canada," she whispered, tracing the markings. He was planning to take TJ to Canada. Chen methodically photographed each item. "This looks premeditated, and that's not all." In the bathroom, she showed feminine hygiene products discreetly arranged. In a basket, shampoo, conditioner, a hairbrush with brown strands tangled in it. "Someone was staying here," Chen concluded. "A woman." Catherine sat on the edge of the bed, her face pale. "Thomas met someone, and together they planned this." Rebecca placed a reassuring hand on Catherine's shoulder. "This is good in a way. The more we know, the closer we are to finding TJ." While Chen collected evidence and made phone calls, Catherine continued her own quiet search. In the office, she meticulously opened each drawer, checked each file. In a locked drawer that she managed to open with a key she still carried, she found something that made her heart stop. A folder labeled Custody. Inside were printed articles about international custody cases, Canadian immigration laws, and, more disturbingly, a handwritten document titled Action Plan. The handwriting was unmistakably Thomas's. "Detective Chen," Catherine called out, her voice trembling. "I think I found something important." Chen examined the documents with a grave expression. "This is concrete evidence of premeditation. I'm going to take all of this for analysis." As Chen carefully packed the documents, the apartment phone rang, startling the three women. After 4 rings, the answering machine picked up. "Thomas, it's me." The female voice sounded strained, nervous. "I need the keys to the cabin tonight. Things are progressing faster than we expected. Call me as soon as you hear this." A click and the message ended, leaving a heavy silence in the room. "I'm going to request an immediate trace on that number," Chen said, already dialing on her cell phone. Catherine remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the answering machine. "They're with my son," she murmured, "in some cabin, and they're planning something for tonight." The rest of the search revealed more disturbing details. An envelope with a significant amount of cash, hidden in a secret compartment in the back of the closet, recent photographs of TJ taken discreetly during his school activities, and a set of blank documents that appeared to be the basis for false identities. Back at the precinct, Sullivan gathered his expanded team to assess the new evidence. The conference room was filled with detectives, officers, and analysts, all focused on the photos and documents scattered across the large central table. "The phone number from the message belongs to one Eleanor Simmons," an officer reported. 38 years old, resides in Hoboken, worked as an administrative assistant at an elementary school in Jersey City until she was fired 6 months ago. "Why?" Sullivan asked. "Inappropriate behavior, overly attached to certain students, crossed professional boundaries, tried to involve herself in family matters. Has one child, Brian Simmons, 13 years old. The father died in a construction accident 4 years ago." Sullivan nodded, the pieces starting to fall into place. "Any known connection to Thomas Wheeler?" "We're still checking, but they both frequented support forums for divorced parents. There are records of attendance at least 2 in-person meetings of the same group." Rebecca, sitting next to Catherine, watched the officers working intently. feeling a mixture of hope and rising anxiety. The investigation was moving quickly, but each new revelation seemed to make TJ's situation more precarious. "What about the cabin mentioned in the message?" she asked. "We're checking properties in both their names within a 100-mile radius," Chen replied. "The problem is, it could be registered under another name or be a vacation rental." Sullivan approached Catherine, who was surprisingly calm, almost in a state of intense focus. "Ms. Wheeler, can you think of any place your ex-husband used to frequent? Any retreats, country homes, friends' properties?" Catherine frowned in concentration. "Nothing recent. But years ago, before TJ was born, we used to rent a cabin near Mount Kisco for weekends. Thomas always talked about buying a place up there someday." "Mount Kisco," Sullivan repeated, turning to his team. "Concentrate the search in that area. Properties sold or rented in the last 6 months." As the afternoon wore on, the investigation gained a new sense of urgency. If the message on the answering machine was any indication, Thomas and Eleanor were planning some significant move that night. That's when another crucial piece of the puzzle emerged. A technician hurried into the conference room carrying a file. "We found something in the security footage from the park gates." The footage, grainy and distorted, showed a rarely used exit from Central Park. The timestamp indicated 23 p.m. the previous day, less than 20 minutes after TJ's disappearance. In the recording, a woman wearing a long dark coat, headscarf and sunglasses walked quickly, holding the hand of a blonde child. Beside them, an older boy, clearly Eleanor's son, carried a backpack with colorful drawings. The trio entered a silver sedan parked nearby. "That's him," confirmed Catherine, pointing to the smaller child. "The way he walks, that's TJ." Sullivan squinted at the screen. "The license plate is partially visible, starts with WRX. The older boy doesn't look scared or confused," Chen observed. "It looks like he's part of this. Or at least, he thinks he is," added Rebecca. "He might not fully understand what's happening." A new search of records revealed that Eleanor Simmons owned a 1994 silver Nissan Altima with license plate WRX 847. An immediate alert was issued for the vehicle. As night approached, the tension in the room was almost palpable. Sullivan organized tactical teams, preparing for possible locations in Mount Kisco and the surrounding areas. Catherine, who had refused to go home to rest, remained silently vigilant, her eyes darting between the phone and the large map on the wall where potential locations were being marked. Rebecca approached her, offering a cup of coffee. "Are you holding up okay?" Catherine accepted the coffee with a slight nod. "I have to stay strong for TJ." She paused, then looked directly at Rebecca. "You know what's hardest? Imagining what Thomas told him, what he made TJ believe in order to go with that woman." Rebecca had no answer to that. The thought of TJ, confused and possibly scared, being manipulated by adults who were supposed to protect him, was devastating. The phone on Sullivan's desk rang, interrupting the moment. He answered it quickly, his face taking on an expression of intense concentration. When he hung up, he turned to the room. "We have a possible location. An isolated cabin near Mount Kisco was rented 3 weeks ago by a woman matching Eleanor Simmons's description. Cash payment, 1-month lease." A wave of activity swept through the room as officers prepared to depart. Sullivan approached Catherine. "Ms. Wheeler, we're sending teams now. I want you to stay here with—" "No," Catherine interrupted, her voice surprisingly firm. "I'm going with you. If TJ's there, he's going to need me." Sullivan hesitated, clearly reluctant. "It's a potentially volatile police operation. I'll stay in the car, away from the action. But I need to be there." Catherine's eyes met Sullivan's, conveying unwavering determination. "He's my son." After a moment of consideration, Sullivan nodded. "All right, but you stay with an assigned officer at all times and follow every instruction. No exceptions." "I'm going too," said Rebecca, surprising herself with her boldness. "No, TJ. He might be scared, confused. A familiar face might help." Sullivan looked at the two women, recognizing the strength of will in both. "All right, but the same rules apply to you, Ms. Morgan. Absolute safety." As the tactical teams geared up, loading equipment and reviewing area layouts, Rebecca felt a strange calm settle over her. After nearly 36 hours of anguish and uncertainty, there was finally a clear path ahead. For the first time since TJ's disappearance, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. What she didn't know was that the situation was about to become complicated in ways no one could predict. For while the police teams mobilized at a secluded cabin in the woods of Mount Kisco, Thomas Wheeler Sr. was arriving by taxi, carrying a large envelope and a look of grim determination on his face. And inside the cabin, a blonde-haired 10-year-old boy looked out the window at the growing darkness, silently wondering when or if he would ever go home. Night had completely fallen when the police convoy approached Mount Kisco. Sullivan led the group in an unmarked black SUV with Catherine and Rebecca in the back seat, both tense and silent. The officer assigned to accompany them, a veteran cop named Martinez, sat next to Sullivan, constantly checking updates on the radio. "We're about 10 minutes out from the location," Sullivan informed them, his voice deliberately calm. "Remember what we discussed. You two stay in the car until the area is declared secure." Catherine nodded stiffly, her eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. Her hands were interlaced tightly in her lap, knuckles white with tension. Rebecca could feel the anxiety radiating from her in almost palpable waves. "It's going to be okay," Rebecca murmured, not entirely convinced herself but feeling the need to offer some comfort. "We're getting to him," the radio crackled. "Tactical unit to leader. We are in position at the entrance to the access road. No visible movement on the property. Lights on the ground floor of the cabin. Target vehicle parked in the driveway. Roger." "That," Sullivan replied. "Hold position. We're approaching." He slowed down and switched off the headlights, allowing the SUV to glide silently along the rural road. After a few more minutes of careful driving, Sullivan stopped the vehicle in a wooded turnout, far enough from the cabin not to be noticed, but close enough for a quick response. "Tactical team will approach first," he explained in a low voice. "We want to assess the situation before any direct approach. Our absolute priority is the boys' safety." Sullivan got out of the car to meet with the other officers who had arrived. In separate vehicles, Rebecca watched through the window as they spoke in hushed tones, pointing to a rudimentary map spread out on the hood of one of the cars. "I can't just sit here," Catherine murmured, her voice trembling with tension. "My son is less than half a mile away." "I know how you feel," Rebecca replied, "but Sullivan knows what he's doing. We need to trust him." Martinez, still in the front seat, looked at them sympathetically. "You two need to remain in the vehicle. The situation could escalate quickly." Catherine nodded reluctantly, but Rebecca noticed how her eyes remained fixed in the direction of the cabin, as if she could see through the dense trees by the sheer force of maternal will. Sullivan returned to the car a few minutes later. "The tactical team is positioning itself around the property. We have partial visibility through the windows. There's movement inside the house, at least 3 people, an adult male, an adult female, and what appears to be an older child." "And TJ?" Catherine asked, leaning forward. "We don't have visual confirmation of him yet, but the house isn't large. If he's there, we'll find him." The radio crackled again. "Leader, this is Tactical 2. We have a developing situation. The subjects appear to be preparing to leave. They're loading bags into the vehicle." Sullivan immediately straightened up. "Roger that. Maintain position, but prepare for interception if they attempt to leave." Turning to Catherine and Rebecca, he said firmly, "This changes things. If they're planning to move, we need to act more quickly than we planned." Before either of them could respond, the radio came back to life. "Tactical 1 to leader. We have visual confirmation of the younger child, blonde-haired boy, matching the description of the target. I repeat, we have visual confirmation of the target." Catherine made a sound, half a gasp, half a sob, and gripped Rebecca's hand with surprising force. "That's him," she whispered. "They found him." Sullivan was already getting out of the car, barking quick orders into the radio. "All units, prepare for approach. Remember, we have a child on site. Maximum caution." It was at that moment that Rebecca realized Catherine was no longer beside her. The car door on the opposite side was open, and Catherine had disappeared into the darkness. "Sullivan!" Rebecca called out in a panic. "Catherine's gone." The detective turned abruptly. "What?" Martinez, stay with Ms. Morgan. Don't let her out of the car, too. Rebecca watched in horror as Sullivan and several other officers ran in the direction Catherine had presumably taken. The carefully orchestrated plan was unraveling rapidly. "Damn it," Martinez muttered, switching on the car radio to monitor the communications. This could complicate everything. Rebecca barely heard him. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of her chest. Catherine, driven by maternal desperation, was potentially running straight into a dangerous situation. And TJ, the sensitive little TJ, was caught in the middle of it all. The next few minutes seemed to drag on forever. Over the radio, Rebecca heard snippets of tense communication between the officers. Apparently, Catherine had been intercepted before she reached the cabin, but her presence had alerted someone inside the house. Tactical 3 to all units. The subjects are aware of our presence. The man is in the vehicle with the older child. The woman is holding the younger boy on the porch. They appear to be arguing about something, Sullivan responded immediately. Do not let that car leave under any circumstances. Prepare for immediate approach. I'm going to attempt verbal contact. Rebecca couldn't stay put any longer. Ignoring Martinez's protests, she got out of the car and ran in the direction of the lights now visible through the trees. The officer followed her, cursing under his breath. When she reached the clearing where the cabin was located, a chaotic scene was unfolding. Police cars had blocked the access road, their lights flashing intensely in the darkness. Officers in bulletproof vests formed a perimeter around the property. In the center of the chaos, Sullivan was standing with a megaphone, Catherine a few steps behind him, gently restrained by 2 officers. "Thomas Wheeler," Sullivan called out through the megaphone. "This is Detective Mark Sullivan of the New York City Police Department. The house is surrounded. Please come out with your hands visible and bring the children with you." There was a moment of tense silence. Then the cabin door opened fully, and Eleanor Simmons stepped onto the porch. She held TJ tightly by the shoulder. The boy looked pale and scared under the bright lights, but physically unharmed. "Don't come any closer," Eleanor shouted, her voice trembling but determined. "We're just trying to keep a family together. You don't understand." Thomas Wheeler emerged from the cabin behind her, with Brian beside him. The teenager looked confused and frightened, glancing frantically between the adults and the police lights. "Thomas," Catherine called out, breaking free from the officers and taking a step forward. "Please let TJ go. He's scared. He needs to come home." Thomas stared at his ex-wife, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "You don't understand, Catherine. I was losing him. You were pushing him away from me with all these rules, all these restrictions." "They were supervised visits for a reason." "Thomas," Catherine replied, her voice firm despite the tears that were now streaming freely down her face. "Your behavior was scaring him. You were becoming obsessive, unpredictable." "I just wanted to be a part of his life," Thomas shouted, his composure finally crumbling. "What kind of father would I be if I didn't fight for my son?" Sullivan took a step forward, keeping his voice calm and authoritative. "Mr. Wheeler, Miss Simmons, you're making the situation worse for yourselves with every minute. Let the boy come to us and we can talk about this civilly." Eleanor squeezed TJ's shoulder tighter, causing the boy to wince. "We promised him a real family. Brian would finally have a brother. I'd finally have a partner who understands. We're not giving that up." Rebecca watched the scene with a heavy heart. Through the flashing lights, she could see TJ's face clearly now. The mixture of fear and confusion in his eyes. The way he was trying to subtly pull away from Eleanor's grip. It was Brian who unexpectedly changed the course of events. The teenager, until then silent, suddenly turned to his mother. "Mom, this is wrong," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "You said Thomas invited us. You said his mom had agreed. But this—" He gestured to the police officers, to the crying. "Catherine, this isn't right." Eleanor stared at her son with an expression of betrayal. "Brian, no, you don't understand. I'm doing this for us. No, you're doing this for you." The teenager was shaking now, years of unexpressed frustrations finally overflowing. "It's always been about you, like at the last school and the one before that. Always trying to create some imaginary perfect family." Thomas looked at Eleanor, then at Brian as if seeing something for the first time. Slowly he stepped away from her, walking to the edge of the porch. "This has gone too far," he said softly, more to himself than to the others. In a swift movement that caught everyone by surprise, Thomas reached out to Eleanor and gently but firmly unwound her hand from TJ's shoulder. "It's over, Eleanor. I was wrong. We both were." TJ, suddenly free, looked around in confusion for a moment, then his eyes met his mother's. "Mommy?" he called out, his voice small and uncertain. "I'm here, my love," Catherine replied, taking another step forward, ignoring the officers trying to restrain her. "You can come to me now, it's okay." As if waking from a trance, TJ ran down the steps of the porch, straight into his mother's open arms. Catherine hugged him tightly, sobbing openly now, her entire body trembling with overwhelming relief. Sullivan immediately signaled for the tactical team to advance. In a matter of seconds, both Thomas and Eleanor were being taken into custody. Eleanor didn't resist, her body seemingly drained of all energy after her own son's intervention. Thomas stood rigidly upright, his eyes fixed on TJ and Catherine, an unreadable expression on his face. Brian remained on the porch, suddenly alone and looking lost. Rebecca, seeing the teenager's vulnerability, approached him cautiously. "Hi, Brian," she said gently. "My name is Rebecca. I'm a teacher at TJ's school." The boy looked at her with eyes full of uncertainty. "What's going to happen to me now?" Rebecca felt her heart clench at the desperate simplicity of the question. "I don't know exactly, but we're not going to leave you alone, I promise." In the following minutes, paramedics examined TJ, who, apart from being dehydrated and exhausted, appeared to be physically okay. Rebecca watched with a lump in her throat as the boy refused to let go of his mother's hand, even during the medical examination. Sullivan approached Rebecca, his face showing the weariness of 48 hours of intense investigation, but also the relief of success. "You did a good job," he said. "Kept your head when a lot of people would have panicked." Rebecca shook her head. "I just wanted him back safe." "Well, that happened largely thanks to your help and insight." Sullivan glanced over to where Brian was being carefully interviewed by a social worker. "The older boy complicates things, apparently has no other close relatives." "He was manipulated just as much as TJ, Rebecca said, maybe more considering it was coming from his own mother. Sullivan nodded grimly. "This is going to leave scars, no doubt, on all of them." As Thomas and Eleanor were led away in separate police cars, Catherine and TJ were settled into an ambulance for transport to the nearest hospital for a more thorough evaluation. Rebecca went over to say goodbye. "TJ," she said softly, "I'm so glad you're okay." The boy looked up at her with tired eyes, but offered a small smile. "Thank you for finding me, Ms. Morgan." "Anytime, TJ." She squeezed his shoulder gently. "Anytime." Catherine took Rebecca's hand for a moment. "I can never thank you enough for everything." "There's no need," Rebecca replied. "Just take care of yourselves, you two." As the ambulance drove away, Rebecca remained in the clearing, watching the red lights disappear into the darkness of the rural road. A complex feeling of relief and exhaustion washed over her, along with a pang of concern for what was to come, for everyone involved, especially for Brian, who now sat alone in the back of a police car, his life irrevocably altered by the actions of adults who were supposed to protect him. 3 months later, on a cold January morning in 1996, Rebecca parked her car in front of the Wheelers' residence. Winter had transformed the suburb into a crystal-white panorama, with snow blanketing the rooftops and gardens. Much had changed since those harrowing days in October. The case had received extensive media coverage, becoming a national talking point about messy divorces, child custody, and the extremes to which desperate parents might go. Thomas Wheeler Sr. had pleaded guilty to various charges, including kidnapping and conspiracy, receiving a 5-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 3. Eleanor Simmons, deemed the primary instigator for having disguised herself as the bear mascot to lure TJ, had received a harsher sentence. The court hearings had revealed the extent of the plan, how Thomas and Eleanor had met in a support forum for divorced parents, how Eleanor, facing her own issues of abandonment and loss, had identified with the distorted narrative Thomas had spun about his situation, how together they meticulously planned the abduction, the escape to Canada, and a new life as a reconstructed family. Rebecca adjusted the scarf around her neck and took the package from the passenger seat. Inside was a gift for TJ, a set of books about oceans and marine life that she knew he would love. The boy had returned to school just a month after the incident, quieter than before, but gradually regaining his confidence with the help of regular therapy and his mother's unwavering support. As she walked along the snow-covered sidewalk toward the front door, Rebecca heard laughter coming from the side yard. Curious, she followed the sound and found a scene that made her stop. TJ and Brian were building a massive snowman, with Catherine supervising from the porch, a steaming mug in her hands. Rebecca's heart leaped. After the incident, Catherine Wheeler had surprised everyone by offering to become Brian Simmons's temporary guardian. Initially, many questioned the decision. Why would she take on the responsibility for the son of the woman who had helped kidnap her own child? But Catherine had remained firm. He's a victim too, she had said simply, and TJ cares about him. It was true. During the few hours they had spent together in the cabin, TJ and Brian had formed an odd connection, the younger boy recognizing the guilt and confusion in the older, and Brian finding in TJ an innocence that he himself had lost too soon. Ms. Morgan. TJ spotted Rebecca and waved enthusiastically, his eyes brighter and more alive than she had seen in months. He ran to her, leaving footprints in the pristine snow. "You came to visit." "Of course I did," Rebecca replied, bending down for a quick hug. "I brought something for you." Brian approached more hesitantly, still shy around visitors. At 13, he carried a weight on his shoulders that no child should have to bear: the betrayal of his mother, the guilt for his unwitting role in the kidnapping, the uncertainty about his future. But today, with his face flushed from the cold and snowflakes in his dark hair, he looked almost like any other teenager. "Hi, Ms. Morgan," he said politely. "Hello, Brian. That snowman is amazing." A small smile appeared on the boy's face. It was TJ's idea to make 3 snowballs instead of 2. He said it's more stable that way. "And he's right," Rebecca agreed, smiling at TJ, always paying attention to the details. Catherine came down the steps of the porch to greet Rebecca. "What a wonderful surprise. Come on in, let's warm up. I have hot chocolate in the kitchen." Inside the cozy house, Rebecca noticed the small changes that indicated Brian's presence: an extra pair of sneakers in the entryway, a teenage coat hanging. Next to TJ's smaller ones, school books for higher grades on the living room table. "How are things going?" Rebecca asked as she accepted a steaming mug. Catherine looked out the kitchen window, where the boys had returned to their snowman project. "One day at a time," she replied, with a tired but genuine smile. "But we're doing okay. TJ's back to drawing. He hasn't done that since before the incident." On the kitchen table, scattered like treasures, were several colorful drawings. Rebecca picked one up. It showed 3 stick figures in front of a house with a smiling sun in the sky. "Our family," Catherine explained, pointing to the figures. "TJ, me, and Brian." "Is it really temporary?" Rebecca asked delicately, referring to Brian's situation. Catherine shrugged, a gesture that communicated both uncertainty and acceptance. "Legally, yes, the temporary custody expires in 3 months, but—" She looked again at the boys through the window. TJ was trying to balance a carrot on the snowman's face, while Brian held him by the shoulders to keep him from slipping. Both were laughing. "Who knows what the future holds?" Rebecca nodded, understanding the unspoken. Some families are formed through pain, others through love, and some, the most resilient, through both. "What about Thomas?" she asked hesitantly. Catherine's face hardened momentarily. "He's written to TJ, letters of apology mostly. He explains what he did, why he thought he was right, and how he now understands he was wrong." She sighed. "TJ isn't ready to read them yet. Maybe someday." As they talked about lighter subjects, school, TJ's friends, Brian's progress in adjusting to his new school, Rebecca couldn't help but notice how different Catherine seemed. There was still sadness in her eyes. There were still moments when her voice trembled slightly when mentioning the kidnapping. But there was also a renewed strength, a determination that hadn't been there before. "You know," Catherine said after a moment of comfortable silence, "before all this, I felt constantly overwhelmed, like I was just surviving day after day. Being a single mum, dealing with Thomas, keeping my job, It seemed impossible sometimes. Rebecca nodded in understanding. But then when TJ disappeared, Catherine swallowed hard. It was like everything else just faded away. Nothing else mattered except finding him. And when we finally did, when I could hold him again. She paused, composing herself. I realized I can handle anything as long as we have each other. And now you have Brian too, Rebecca observed softly. Catherine smiled. Yes, he needs us as much as we need him in a way. He gives TJ someone to look up to, someone who understands what he went through. And for me, well, he gives me a purpose. Beyond my own pain. Helping him overcome what his mother did helps me overcome what Thomas did. Outside, the snowman was nearly complete. Brian had lifted TJ onto his shoulders so the younger boy could place an old hat on top of the creation. The two were talking animatedly, their faces lit up with a kind of carefree joy that had seemed impossible just months ago. I used to be so afraid of the future, Catherine said, watching the boys. Of what Thomas might do, of how I would protect TJ, of how we would pay the bills, but now I know that we can face whatever comes together. Rebecca squeezed Catherine's hand gently. You are an amazing family, Catherine, all three of you. Later, as Rebecca prepared to leave, TJ and Brian came running into the house, covered in snow and laughing. TJ immediately rushed to show Rebecca the gift she had brought, while Brian helped Catherine prepare more hot chocolate. Look, Brian, TJ exclaimed, showing off the books about oceans. Now I can tell you all about cephalopods. Cool, Brian replied, genuinely interested. Those are the ones with the tentacles, right? Yeah, like octopuses and squids. They're really smart, you know. They can solve puzzles and everything. Rebecca watched the interaction with a smile. It was extraordinary how children could recover, how they could find joy even after traumatic experiences. TJ would still have a long road ahead of him. The emotional scars of the kidnapping wouldn't disappear overnight. Brian would face his own challenges, reconciling with his mother's actions, and finding his place in this new makeshift family.